evening. I would like to call tonight's Shakopee School Board meeting for Tuesday, November 13th, 2018 to order. Sarah, would you please take the roll?
Bowerman.
Yes, ma'am.
Hallett. Here. McKeon.
Here.
Voss.
Here.
Tomzik. Here. Tucker. Here. And Swanson.
Good evening. First of all, before we jump into our good news items, I would like us to all please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good news items. We've got 3 good news items we're going to cover today. First one, I'd like to call up a couple of individuals, Akshay Benkaila and Joseph DaCosta. You want to come on up? Congratulations to Shakopee High School students Joseph DaCosta and Akshay Benkaila on being recognized as National Merit Scholarship Commended Students. There we go. In late September, about 34,000 of approximately 50,000 high school high scorers on the PSAT received letters of commendation and recognition of their outstanding academic promise. Although commended students do not continue in the competition for National Merit Scholarships, some of these students do become candidates for special scholarship sponsored by corporations and businesses. Again, congratulations to Joseph and Akshay on a job well done.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, fantastic certificate suitable for framing. Joseph?
Yes.
Hand.
Thank you.
One for you. Okay, there you go. Congratulations.
Do you want picture? Picture.
Yeah,
Wait,
hold on.
wait,
Mike? Nothing? All right. All right, guys, congratulations. All right. And we have another special guest in the house. Is Sammy the Saber here? Would you please stand up, Sammy? Yes, please do come up to the front. As you well know, our very own Sammy the Saber has been named the best mascot by WCCO Channel 4. Jack Neal, the face, the student behind the mascot, received more votes than any other mascot and won the top honor in the entire state. Congrats to high school senior Jack Neal. Jack, do you have anything to say?
It's not supposed to. Oh, wait.
Oh.
He speaks.
It's on there. Not really, I mean, sort of. It's just an honor. When I tried out, I did not see this coming at all. It's just like, hey, a sport, mom and dad's gonna be proud of me. I'm actually doing something. And yeah, it's an honor, and it's also awesome how Shakopee actually cares about me, yes?
Yeah.
Well, the cat, but you know, I'm sort of part of it.
Well, I will tell you, it has been just a blast watching you. I think you are fantastic. You bring energy and fun, and I know the students love to have you around too, so it's pretty cool.
Great job. Thank you.
I especially love seeing you interact on that clip with some special ed students and with young kids, and you know, 2 thumbs up on that. For
Yeah,
you.
that was an awesome story.
Thank you.
So,
All right,
congratulations.
congratulations.
Well earned.
Yes.
Do you want to take 2.5 minutes and watch this story? I don't know.
Yeah, can
I
we?
think we should.
Let's do that. Is that all right? Can we play that?
There's a shadow now that I've seen behind
Impromptu. No sound?
Don't worry, I remember what I said.
Word for word for us?
No sound. That's weird. I know, right?
All right, so if they want to watch this video and they haven't had a chance yet to see it, where would we go to find this?
It is linked within the school board agenda
Yep.
under Jack's name. The whole URL is listed there. Highlight, copy, and paste.
There you go.
It's in our
Save
social
her
media
at Facebook,
accounts,
too.
All right.
There you go.
All right.
All right.
Let's shake the man's hand. Jack, congratulations. Thank you very much.
And,
Well done.
Wait, do you want picture?
We better get a photo of Jack.
Yeah.
With the hat or without the hat?
With and without.
With and without the hat.
Oh.
Yes.
There you go. That's great. There you go. That's
I don't know, I
perfect.
didn't know she was
Oh,
doing
that's-
those two.
Scott's hogging the limelight here.
That's so great. Okay, now-
Karma right there.
You
don't want to put it on.
This will be really
Yeah, put the head on Swanson next.
Can you take a picture of me?
That's awesome.
How fun is that?
That's great.
All right, and the third good news item is actually not on my write-up here, but I wanted to just publicly welcome this gentleman to my immediate left, Dr. Mike Redmond. This is his first official board meeting with Shakopee Public Schools, and we are very, very honored that you are here to join us tonight and for the next 3 years. So, welcome, congratulations. Thanks for being here.
I'm honored to be here. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm excited about the future of the Shakopee School District. It's a great place, and like I said, I'm just thrilled to be here. And thank you.
All right. Welcome.
Thanks.
All right, moving through the agenda here, we'll move on to item number 4, consideration of the agenda as presented. There are no additions. Any motion to entertain? Tony? Oh,
Wait, what?
Tony's moved and seconded by Rich.
Thank you.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. We move on to item number 5, which is consent items. I'll entertain a motion to approve consent.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Angela and Matthew. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. We're gonna do
And is
this.
this where I'm supposed to talk about Glenda?
Oh, yes, yeah, if you could just mention it maybe at this point, because they've acted on the consent agenda, so maybe just highlighting her.
Okay, all right. Glenda Tice was first hired in 1984, and she was a central duplicating operator. She was later promoted to central duplicating coordinator, and is someone who desperately always relied on her services. You know, we talk about a paperless society, and we're a long way from that. School districts live and breathe on copies, and as much as I'm sure she had a lot of last-minute requests and people bringing stuff to her that they needed it yesterday and that kind of thing, when you went down there to pick up your copies, she was just organized and as calm in the middle of a turbulent scene, so she did her job very well. So I congratulate her.
And everybody knew who she was. I mean, if you're a teacher or admin anywhere in the district, you knew who she
Glenda.
was. And yeah, it was, she's kind of she's located, our central duplicating is in the basement kind of our central family center. And she has been tucked down there for a really long
All right. Thanks for that. All right, moving on to item number 6, old business discussion items. I would like to invite up Principal Jeff Alecki and Academy Principal Ed Cox to come up and talk about our proposed graduation requirements.
They
Yep,
did,
there you go.
yep.
Good.
They have it.
Good evening, everybody. Sammy was here. I was thinking we'd get a roller coaster ride going here, but Sammy left. Sammy left. Yeah. Tough to follow national merit students and Sammy the savior. We'll give it a try here. So yeah, we're here tonight for board review. As we know, with the move to a pure block schedule next year, the graduation requirements are impacted by that. So So as we know, right now, we're currently under a 7-period day. Students can earn 14 credits in a year. Next year, when we move to a block schedule, when you go to a true 4x4, students taking 4 periods, 4 terms, the total possible credits that a student can earn in a year turns into 16 credits. So what we need to do is we need to take a look at far as, okay, we know the total number of students need, what are the minimum that students need to graduate, still fitting in all those state mandated requirements, our local requirements, all of those pieces of the puzzle. So if you look up on the board there, I did the bullet points, but then also the grid is really the handy dandy thing that's really gonna paint the picture. The key thing when you look at the 5 different grids with the different classes, class of 2019, 20, 21, 22, and 23 and beyond, I like to start at the bottom, the total possible credits. Like I said, right now a Shakopee student has 56 total possible credits. The total credits required to graduate right now for the class of 2019 is 48 credits. So when you look through, starting in the bottom and then you go up to the top, you've got your core requirements and then your elective requirements. You can add those up and that's how you get the numbers. Well, what happens is when I go to the block schedule next year for each class, that total number is going to increase by 2 because now we're going to 16. So that's how we get the total possible credits, 56, 58, 60, 62, and 64. As far as the total credits required to graduate, if you notice right now at the class of 2019, we have a spread there, 48, 56, there's an 8 credit spread. So under the proposed, we still maintain that 8 credit spread because you're still gonna have opportunities for students, say, to do office aid, teacher's aid. There could be, some form of an open period, targeted services, those types of things. So you still wanna create that wiggle room in the schedule for students. When you look at, if you go to the far right side for the class of 2023 and beyond, that will be the class that will have all 4 years under the block schedule. Some things to highlight, the graduation requirements that are state mandated that we've done before, we're gonna continue to do that. In fact, we follow the state of Minnesota standards, except for in social studies. We've always done this and we'll continue to do it. We do 1 additional credit requirement. We have the freshman seminar class, which we are currently doing under our current schedule. That will be a graduation requirement. We will implement the financial literacy requirement, and then the 3 credits for the program of study, the 3 core sequence, and then that gets you to the 38 required credits. You add on the elective credits, you get to the 56. So you think back for those of you that were here a couple of years ago, when we were talking about the alternating block 8-period day, that was the same number of credits. So a lot of the work that we've done before talking about the financial literacy, the programs of studies we've known about, it was really an easy transition because we're still ending up with that 64 possible credits in a high school career. So that is really how we have it laid out. I think one special note there on the bottom is, and this is through a lot of discussion and in just previous experience being a teacher and an administrator in a 4-period school, is likely what we would do is we would probably do away with an open registration for study hall, but that's not to say if you're a student, say you're on a 504 or you're on an IEP and you need some targeted services or some form of a study hall, we would still provide that. I would anticipate we could still have some form of an open period for students, right? Or an office aide or a teacher's aide, because on the other spectrum of that, you could be, I've got a heavy course load this term, so there still could be opportunities to have those things that, to fit in there. From my experience, what you don't want to do you don't want to create a schedule where 25% of a student's day for an entire year is occupied in a study hall, especially when we have such great electives and course offerings that we have here in Shakopee. So I think I have covered all the bullet points up there. So those are as far as the requirements go, as presented. Are there any questions?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
The program of study, the 3
Yeah.
courses are required.
Yes.
But in the course catalog, those are elective courses, right? So there could be some
Correct.
confusion as to whether those are required core courses or it's a series of elective things.
Right, so let's say I'm in the Business and Entrepreneurship Academy, right? I'm gonna have those elective courses, there's that 3-course sequence, I'm gonna pick a course from each of those. yes, those are electives. I've satisfied my 3-course sequence, but then I might be taking classes, you know, that are going to be within that program of study in another academy. Well, those would certainly count towards their elective credits. So it really is, when you take that 18 credit, if you go to the far right-hand side, that total elective, and you take that 18, you're really taking that 18 plus that 3. But we just want to make sure students are getting at least one of those 3-course sequences in.
That's why you'll notice why the number of elective goes up to 19 and then comes back down, because you're summing that with the program study.
Well, thank you. And in theory, you know, one of the things we've heard as a detraction from the academy model was, you know, people who didn't kind of fully grasp it would say, oh, you're stuck only in one academy.
Right.
With your one required course of study and then 18 more electives. If you're really planful, you could complete 7 courses of study, and, you know,
Yeah.
you could hit every academy.
Right.
Yeah, you look at the number of electives our students have now, it's 15. Even with the program study, they have 18 electives.
Mhm.
Yeah, so nobody's pigeonholed or told that
Right.
they can't take the classes they want.
Right, when you see that number, it really shows you, oh, wow, here's how many opens, after I do my requireds, I do that 3-course sequence, and I still have this much available in my schedule for fine arts, for world language, for other electives and other academies. Yep.
And that also leaves, there's also the additional kind of 8 cushion between what's required and what's available, so you really even have more options for somebody that wants to take a ton of electives.
Yeah, yeah, and really, you know, speaking to that cushion, just from personal experience and years of doing this, is really what you like to do, is you like to create the culture where, yes, we are counting credits and keeping track of that, but you treat it like a whole 4-year high school experience, right? Where, you know, you're going through and you're taking advantage of everything that high school has to offer, and really, by and large, the overwhelming majority of our students graduate with beyond what that minimum requirement is, for sure.
Sean, do you have an additional question? Sorry.
I've got a student in the class of 2022 and 2020, but for 2022 in particular, how do we start to communicate to those freshmen right now what things need to look like? How do you roll that out?
Well, they're already doing that in
Yeah.
their freshman seminar.
knows, yeah.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I mean, do they understand that 62 is the possible total credits available and what their requirements are gonna have to be?
Yeah, and usually what you'll do for all grades, or for all the classes, that really starts to heat up when you get back from the holidays in January, right? Because we're gonna start that process of registration, choosing your academy, and so really in January and February, that's where you really hit that hard, communicating to families of here's exactly what this looks like. There'll be a registration night, multiple forms of information.
Worksheets.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
last year, when we were prepping this, assuming that we were going to a block for this year,
Mhm.
we had all that stuff in the registration guide ready to roll that explained, you know, the different formats depending on grade. We had to pull that out, but it'll look something like that as well.
Just wanted to, I have a question and a statement, clarify for anybody who's looking at this, where it says, like 12th grade, 11th grade, 10th grade, it's actually our current, like we're 12th grade is our current 11th graders. So just want to make sure that it's.
For next
noticing.
year's registration.
Yeah.
12th grade in the fall.
Right, and I just want to make sure people understand that,
Correct.
just wanted to clarify. The
Yeah.
other thing is, I have a student, I have a 2019 and a 2021. My 2019 won't benefit from this, but my 2021, as a parent, I would love for him to take the financial literacy course. Is it an option for kids not in the 22?
So we currently have a financial literacy course that we
Okay.
offer. It's gonna get a rehash and a redo, but it won't be for next year, because that group of students that it will be required for, the target market is gonna be 11th and 12th grade. So we'll put it in, we'll redo that, and then, I'm kind of speaking for Nancy here, but TNL will look at redoing that going into, not next year, but the year after. But we do offer a personal financial.
Okay, I just, right, but, so it's sort of the same course, but not, it will be a remake of that, of the
Yeah.
personal finance
Yep,
course.
yep, it'll just be an opportunity to update that course. as
And you
well.
say it's targeted toward 11th and 12th graders?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
so if a 12th grader wanted to take it,
Yes.
So
Mhm.
we should
Yeah.
plan for that maybe.
So they could
to
wait
have
and
them
take
take
it
it.
if somebody had a 12th grader that maybe wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And a parent who urged them to take it.
You can make that a parent required only.
Yeah.
So I want to follow up on, I think you've answered my question, which was relative to financial literacy, which everyone knows I have a huge passion for and kind of want it named in my honor, but very glad to see we're going to do that. The fact that it's here is what, 10 years of effort. You said 11th and 12th grade. I think that's important because I don't want to say that 9th graders and 10th graders couldn't maybe capture the concepts and understand. They're going to be exposed to more things as an older student in terms of financial matters. So I'm glad to hear that. Do we know if that's going to be, maybe it's too early in the process, do we know if we're going to mandate that? It's only going to be for juniors and seniors? Or as people look at their schedule and say, you know, I really can't fit it in because of what I'm doing my senior year, I'm going to take it my
Caps.
sophomore year,
Yeah.
or caps or whatever. So I want to be flexible, but at the same time, I see the merit in it being targeted later.
I would assume, and again, it's a little early in the process, but I would assume that it will say it's open to 11th and 12th graders, and then obviously we work with kids that have their needs.
But if they take it earlier, it still would count as their required requirement, right?
And I would add to Reggie that freshman seminar has some personal financial components to it as well. So our 9th graders are getting exposed as well when they do some of their career investigation pieces. They're doing some budgeting and looking at, kind of like, here are the things that I want in life. How do I tie a career to that and an education plan? Kind of give them that little real world bend to it. So there is some scaffolding going up to it as well.
Great. Very
And then,
pleased to
do
see
you want to go, there's a second, I know there was, and I'll be short on this, I know there were some questions just as we transition to the block, kind of what's happening from a development of that schedule and a professional development as well, because it's one thing to have a set of graduation requirements and agree we're going to do block, and then there's a lot of nuances of how are we going to implement that we're working through right now. And so some of the things that we've been doing is our building leadership team, our BLT, the administration, we've been working in through those meetings and then through some subcommittees, kind of diving into all of the details. For example, how are we going to schedule out our advanced placement courses when the test is in May, regardless of what schedule we run? How are we going to adjust for our CIS courses? How are we going to figure out band, choir? All those kinds of details. We have six or seven different committees that are working on that. A few of those are going to be finishing up because they are tied to registration. So how long a course is going to be, how many credits it's worth, we need to get that figured out. So we have those committees wrapping up. We have a BLT meeting the end of this month. They'll be making final recommendations to administration, who will then be putting those in, making some decisions. Because as you can guess, there are some of those that maybe conflict. This decision might directly conflict with this subcommittee's decision, so we have to hammer out those details. And there was some opportunity for teacher feedback in that process. Then as far as professional learning, we're going to use the November early release as an opportunity for some of that teacher feedback. So about 45 minutes of time during the November early release will be a chance for teachers to hear about where those subcommittees are at and provide some feedback. January and February PD days, we're looking at how do we do that foundational curriculum work so teachers have an opportunity to think about how they transition. There's some change in overall length of course time. And really it's going to be kind of that foundational piece of what's the most important aspects of my course, and then how do I move those forward and create some scheduling, and lots of opportunity for work time. So within those days, we're hoping to have about at least 50% of teachers' time is going to be planning time towards that, and then looking ahead to this spring and summer. Our last two early release days, our plan is to run some mock block schedule days, so maybe there'll be like 3 blocks in a day, and teachers can work a little bit on that and then have some reflection time within that, and then depending on where our professional development dollars come out at the end of the year, having some summer curriculum writing time available for those that are willing as well, so that they can look at their courses and prepare the way they need to.
This is too deep in the weeds, but it's something I'm curious about. One of what felt to me challenges with going to the block was figuring out the CAPS schedule. Do you have any updates on how
So what the business partners have recommended, which is likely where we'll land, is that they would want it to be over 3 quarters. And so the first 2 quarters would be 2 periods, so half of a student's day,
Yeah.
On site at the business.
Yeah.
And then the 3rd quarter would be that internship. And the challenge when they were 3 quarters going to block, mixing travel time, is they're only adding about 30 minutes of total time to their daily time in CAPS, and so it's not quite like you can just shrink it into half the time because of that. And so that's kind of where they have landed, and that's the recommendation I'll be moving forward to administration, and we'll be working with Nancy and her department on that as well.
And then what if kids do the fourth quarter?
Then they take a different quarter class. So if you think of any other semester
Right, 'cause we're on the
elective,
block, right.
most of those
Yeah,
become
sorry,
quarter classes.
Sorry, yes.
But you're right, Dashawn, because I think there's gonna be some paradigm shifts for both our staff and our community of courses being in that shorter time frame, being at different times of the year, maybe a little less tied to a particular age, is something that we've talked about. Both Jeff and I have taught in the block, and you have kids that self-accelerating math was something that we would say all the time, like, I'm gonna take Algebra 2 and FST in the same year because I
Yeah,
can.
and then they
You know,
accelerate.
and so there's a little bit less of that tied to an A or a grade category for
Right.
different courses.
Yeah.
You know, I see a lot of really good planning for especially the curriculum piece and the logistics of it, but I don't see any staff development, and I'm sure it's there somewhere, for teaching on the block.
Great
Because courses should change
Yeah.
if they're teaching on the block.
Yeah, and you can chime in on this. You know, I was actually gonna make a comment. I think one of the benefits that we have in our district is that we've had a number of years to, we knew the academy model was coming, right? So when you talk about authentic instruction and, those real life experiences, and I tell my teachers this, is I go into a classroom right now in a 7-period, 45-minute class period, and I see evidence, I see strategies, I see instruction that would work wonderful in an 85-minute class period. Because we've had that time to prepare, we know this is coming, we have teachers that are working in teams on a regular basis. And so, the PD that we're gonna do is really important, because I think back years and years ago when I transitioned from a 7-period to a block, was just having that time, how do I stretch things out, and how do I work with if I'm teaching, most of my courses were 1 term, 85-minute class period, 1 term, how do I make sure I get everything in? We wanna make sure we provide that time to do that. But I really do believe that because of all of this work that we've been doing and what we've been planning for and what we continue to do, the teachers have it within themselves, right? They know I've got a captive audience here for 85 minutes, right? We know it can't be a sit and get. I don't want it to be a sit and get in 45 minutes,
No,
right?
no.
And so we're already doing that, and I know the work that we're gonna do this year, planning for that, is gonna help continue to build that. And I think a real advantage that we have, when you go to a lot of places, again, going back to early in my career, you get hired somewhere, and if it's the block schedule, they kind of say, here's your curriculum, away you go, right? But I really believe we have some very sound PD that is currently taking place, and we have structures in place that I really think are positioning our teachers very well to be able to handle this move with the curriculum model, the academy model that we have.
I'd also like our community to know that we have leadership in place that has experience with the block. You taught on the block,
Taught and a principal.
and you were a principal on the block, you taught on the block. So we do, huh?
Yeah, just said that.
Yeah,
You taught on the block
and so
too?
So did Mr. Jordan.
Okay, so we have a lot of leadership in the buildings that have experience in this type of scheduling. So I think with their knowledge and the knowledge of all of our leadership and all of our teachers, that we're on a good trajectory.
I could just add a little bit more to your question too. So when you look at those January and February PD days, something specifically that we're gonna do is all of the teacher learning is gonna be in a block structure. It's gonna have that framework of how do we use kind of that gradual release at the beginning with some opportunities for hands-on authentic time within it. How do you chunk out that time? So as you know, in good professional learning, we want to model the practices that we're talking about. And so a lot of the instructional approach will be embedded into the curriculum work. I think the other side of it too is we're trying to be honest with ourselves about where our teachers' greatest areas of concern are right now. And it's generally around, am I planned and prepared? And so we're trying to honor that as well, knowing that good instructional practice is something we're always going to be working on.
Another question I had back to some of the courses, is the financial literacy class, is that taught by a FACS teacher, business teacher?
Yeah, right now we have our business teachers teach that. Now, I'm a former business teacher myself, so what you can do with a class like that, clearly a business teacher could do it. I know as a business teacher, I'm licensed to teach economics courses, so conversely, I think you could look at social studies teachers who have that economic background could be another candidate to teach a class like that.
All right. And I wonder if that's going to be hard for PSEO students to take that class.
I think anytime you have those courses that are at the end that are required, it comes with some challenges, right? Like if we have seniors that are taking a required in the spring of their senior year and things don't go well, we don't have a lot of wiggle room. And so much like our other senior level electives, that's going to be a challenge. But PSEO students, like they do now, they have to meet our requirements. They'll have to do
Right.
that as well.
Back when we rolled this out, and I don't expect an answer, I'm just curious if you've made any progress there. I think there were some questions relative to CIS and AP. For example, CAS, we have Dr. Johnson in the audience, but will the University of Minnesota accept the compressed time frame? Is there any issue with that? If we don't have an answer, we don't, great. And then AP, I think it was the fact that you took the course early in the year and then the test isn't offered until later, so there's a gap. Have we started to cross those bridges?
Yeah, so I'm actually, that's the subcommittee that I'm running. So the CIS is essentially, and Dr. Johnson can speak to this as well, we just do what the U tells us to do. So they met with Julie Williams, thank you, the other day, specifically looking at our courses. So Nancy met with them, and we'll be getting that feedback. And really, for the CIS courses, we're kind of looking at two criteria. What does the partnering college tell us we have to do from a minimum, and then what makes sense for our schedule? Right. We've always had this like 2-to-1 count ratio on our CIS courses, and that's led to some kind of wonky things where a kid would take a semester-long course and get 2 high school credits because the college is worth 4 credits. And we may be able to clean a little bit of that up as we go to this schedule as well. And then from the AP standpoint, which has been where most of the dialogue has been, is we actually are creating kind of an objective rubric that looks at a number of factors to determine. The biggest question has been, will it be 3 terms or 2 terms? Because you kind of see it done both ways in the block, and it depends on the course. And so we're looking at things like, is the course taught at a grade level where it's nationally taught? You know, so we have some courses like AP Human Geo is taught at the 9th grade level, and that's where almost everybody takes it. But we have AP Physics 1 that's taught where we make up like 5% of the kids in the country that take it at the 9th grade level. So that's a factor to consider. Looking at the number of credits that a college will give for that course. Looking at past success rates. So if we're having a lot of success in a semester, then we probably don't need to make it into more time. Those kinds of things. So those are some of the measures that we're looking at. Because in most schools, and again, we both can speak to this, whether it's 3 or 2 terms, usually it comes down to who pounds their fist on the desk the hardest. And we're trying to avoid that if we can here.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I know, and having come from my last school being a block, but you will get that student, right? I want to take every AP class there is in the book. And so you do have to be mindful when you are making those decisions of whether it's a 3-term or a 2-term. You've got to always go back and look at, okay, can a student kind of fit all those courses in there, knowing that, you know what, AP language comp, for example, okay, it's a 2-term course. There's going to have to be some AP that's going to be in that first part of your schedule, even though that test isn't until May. But then maybe what we've done before, okay, if I'm taking a course that first semester and that course isn't until May, well then, as we get closer to the test, we have some refreshers type stuff. So you do have to be mindful when you're looking at that 16, piece grid, that we can still accommodate all of those needs, right?
On the other hand, because we have an 8-credit gap between what's required and what's available, if theoretically a student could take 8 3-quarter or 3-term AP classes and still fit in within our graduation requirements. So there's wiggle room to accommodate 3 terms.
And when you look at our AP offerings, especially those that are in kind of our core areas, they're spread out pretty well across the students, 9 through 12 grades. So we only have a couple of spots where you would see kids generally taking 2, possibly 3 at the same time. Right. You're more likely going to be a junior or senior who's taking an AP course and a CIS course for those kids that are really in that game.
Right.
So
So fair to say that there is no action needed today, this is more of our first reading, and we come back in December, or in?
Yeah, I think the way it's written on there is the December 10th.
Formal approval December 10th, yeah.
And
Sounds
we're
like
all
you
on-
guys have thought of everything.
I think we've been thinking about it for a long time.
We maybe have
A lot
made
of
this
years. I mean,
presentation
several-
before.
Yeah, but
Well, and you're on pace for normal registration timing, which flows into registering and staffing and budget and all of those things, so.
Yeah, yeah, we're looking at all those things, okay, we have the registration guide coming up, what are all those elements that we have to have in that guide and ready to go, and what are the elements of getting ready for the block schedule that can take place, so you just kind of plan all of that out, and, no, you know, at the end of the day, there are a lot of good schedules that are out there, you know, there really are, but, the one that I enjoyed about this one as a teacher, as an administrator, is really and our 7th period day did the same thing too, so that's the nice thing, is we're not giving anything up, it's just the opportunities for kids and the choice that they have, and I really, you know, my own conversations at home with my own daughter, 85 minutes for, you know, but then they did a practice at East, and I said, well, how was it? And she didn't want to admit it, but she's like, I got 4 classes that day, and I'm like, exactly.
It's such a coincidence.
And that has been my experience, no matter where I've been, is that kids genuinely enjoy that schedule. It's good balance, workload balance, and as a teacher, I loved it because I could really take that deep dive and, you know, and do that formative assessment and get that instant feedback right within that same time period. And you know, when you think of our populations, I'm working with our SPED teachers. We have actually one of our SPED teachers was kind of the main supervisor person with me at my last district, and now she's over here in Shakopee. You know, pure coincidence how that worked out, but we're already talking about, you know, there are a lot of creative things that you can do in that 85-minute where you can create skinnies, meaning that you're taking some classes and you're making maybe a couple 40-minute classes experiences. So, you know, if you're a parent and you have a student and you're thinking, boy, that time amount is a real struggle, you can be very creative on how you do that. And I know everywhere that I've been where we've had the block, we've been able to do a very good job of meeting the needs of all of our students, right? And not just the CIS or the AP. It's a schedule that can be customized for all kids. And so I think that's really important for families to hear that.
Any questions?
Good work, guys.
I think
All
we
right.
have plenty of
Thank you.
questions.
We're ready for you in December.
All right.
All right, we'll move on to item 6.2, update on school district leases. Assistant Superintendent, temporary Assistant Superintendent Orlowski is here, and is Eric, there's Eric, come on up, Eric.
So we have Eric here to help fill in the holes that I missed and talk about, we're going to connect what the high school talked about to Takata programming, but we're going to kind of do it in chunks. So first I just want to talk about the leases from a pure nuts and bolts standpoint. So was this, yeah, okay. So what we worked on, and Scott was part of this, and Eric was part of this, and Jeff Jeff, are you up? Is Jeff here? Jeff's not here. Okay. So we are leasing 2 spaces here in the mall, and one is the Takata Learning Center, and I'll talk about that first, and the other here is the district office. If we don't do anything, originally if we didn't do anything at the start of this year, our lease for Takata space was going to expire this coming July, so July of 19, okay? But what we wanted to do is see if actually I'm gonna back up even further. By October 31st of this year, which just passed, we had to make a decision on what we were gonna do with that space. And in the lease that we had, it allowed us to decide end of the lease or take 3 more years onto the lease. And the price is fixed, it's in the lease, it's very competitive. And then there's also in that lease, just for reference, another 3 years that we could add on at the end of that. But what we weren't ready to do at this time is commit to those 3 years right now. Because what the board has talked about doing here in the near future is kicking off another facility task force that will look at our spaces, not just the buildings that we own, but also the space that we lease. given that we were changing to a block schedule, we just changed to a 9 to 12 high school from a 10-12, and trying to figure out how that interacts with Takata. Takata also has some desires to have some space that kids can do physical fitness in there, which they don't have right now. So there was a little bit of pressure to want to match up with the programming at the high school and the new graduation requirements, maybe get some additional space. Trying to do that and decide all that by this October 31st was too much of a rush. So what we did in working with our, I don't know if you'd call him a consultant or leasing expert, Corey Whitbeck, is see if the owner of the mall, given all our moving parts, would let us have a 1-year extension on where we're at right now and kick that back. And so when you see this new current expiration date of July 31st of 20, it actually took quite a bit of work to get them to agree to extend it out 1 year and give us time to do some additional planning. And that's why Eric is here, because we're starting to talk about what that planning could look like, and we're actually on a fairly tight time frame even to get that done. What it would look like if we expanded programming, and I don't want to steal everything you're going to talk about, maybe if we just got some additional space to do physical fitness in, and how that might look, and what we do in terms of the new requirements that we're placing on our high school kids, how that might look at Takata, because it's always, the programming needs to align as much as possible. So I'm going to stop and let Eric jump in here.
So, like Dave was saying, I think this lease extension gives us a pretty good opportunity to explore and study a couple things. First, the changing needs of the students at the TLC, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But also the changing graduation requirements that Jeff and Ed just presented, and implications on TLC programming. So first, the changing needs. We have right now more demand than we have supply for the TLC. And while our wait list ebbs and flows based on pretty predictable cycles, there are some students that need to move or have a strong desire to move on the dime, and we can't always accommodate. And so that has kind of a backup effect on our graduation rates and credit gaps kind of growing rather than closing, because students stack up at the high school and they're waiting for a spot, and we can't always deliver right away. And so, that's one thing. The other thing is there's a change in demand in the who in terms of students. Now that we've shifted to a 9-12 model, the TLC was originally designed to be a 10-12 building on a 4x4 block schedule, and there was a beauty behind that because we could offer 16 credits a year. High school on a 7-period day could offer 14. There was a natural credit recovery built into that. And the way that we were staffed was pretty balanced, where we would have a core teacher, and they could teach 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade courses in each one of the core requirements. And then they would have a prep and an advisory, and it balanced up pretty well. But now that we're getting an influx of 9th graders, 15-year-olds, 14-year-olds in some cases, wanting to move earlier, we're stretched. If we're going to offer 9th grade programming, we need to have the staff and the space to offer 9th grade programming. And so that's a changing need, as well as kind of just some of the core issues that we're working with students, a need for increased wraparound support, and as Dave mentioned, just a physical outlet for our students, so that, especially during these late fall to early spring months when we can't get outside and shoot hoops, whatever it is, to kind of just give that physical release, something to offer them to keep that kind of physical mental balance for the students. So that's a change that this extension of the lease creates an opportunity to explore and study. And then the other thing that I think that we're kind of right now pressed up against time to do is to understand how the change in graduation requirements are going to impact TLC programming. Okay, because like I said, we've had a comparative advantage up to this point, not only are we losing that?
Yeah.
Because they're going to a 4x4 block, but now the graduation requirements are going to stack up.
Yeah.
And so this gap is going to start to increase. Now, we can expect to see a little bit of kind of catch up because students are going to be taking, just by sheer volume, more courses as they're in high school before they come over to the TLC. But from preliminary studies that we've done, students that struggle in one classes are oftentimes struggling in multiple classes. Okay, and so it's going to lead to a conversation about, where is the best place to meet the changing needs of these students? Is it in investing in resources to provide additional programming to meet all these new elective requirements and pathways, or is it to kind of reflect and think about having rigorous but different requirements? Okay, and what does that mean? I know that there's a strong desire from TLC students to graduate underneath the Shakopee High School diploma. That is a big draw. And it raises the question, can we do that differently? And so I kind of just offer that food for thought, and we kind of have some work to do. And so we've started, and this isn't, we're not caught off guard here. We've been thinking about this for a while, ever since the proposal for graduation requirements have come out. But we need to kind of start making some concrete decisions with it. So we have a tentative study team in place with TNL to talk about graduation requirements and some possibilities with that. And then it'll be time from there, after that conversation has been had, to talk about what the programming response should be, along with the space at the current site to meet those programming needs.
Can you add to that? You alluded to it a little bit at the beginning, Eric, but what the kind of the range of your waiting list is, and what that looks like for a kid that has decided that Takata is the right place for them, and then takes 6 months, or even the one student we were talking about, or more.
And it's hard to kind of group, because every student situation or scenario is different. But typically what you'll see is as you work through a school year, now the high school is on semesters. Usually, you get through that first initial go of 5 or 6 weeks into the high school year, and students that are struggling usually, rise to the top and are identified, and that's usually when the first influx of applications come in. And it can be anywhere from 10 to 15 to 20, and we usually have a carryover of about 10 to 15 to 20 from the previous school year, and so they kind of get stacked on the bottom, and then we also see another kind of influx after first semester, and so it's like every quarter break, students are looking to move. And then we usually swipe a good chunk as we graduate students. For example, we graduated 9 this last week, and that created some space to bring in other students. And so it's constantly a game of shuffling, and who's the right fit, right need, right time, and it's an art as well as a science, and so there's no best way to do it. And it would be, I think, in the best interest of our students if we could have a more, I would say, timely response for some of their needs.
So how many students, let me answer that very well. How many students can Takata reasonably accommodate each quarter?
Good question. And so reasonably accommodate, I say 92 is what I schedule to it. And here's the other kind of challenge is when you only offer one section of each course, and when you have students ages 14 to 20, 21 needing different classes, okay, it's hard to predict what the scheduling needs are going to be. And so you may have a quarter where there's a real high demand for English 11, 12, and so you try to fill that, and class sizes increase to 25, 26. Whereas that same quarter, maybe biology A and B is 8 students, 9 students in the end. So you kind of have to schedule to the high end, which means you don't always have good balance. And so 92 with a little bit of attrition and a little bit of transient attendance gets us to a place where every day we can accommodate 20 students in a class.
And how many how many students generally are waiting?
Generally, I'd say 40.
You have 40
Oh,
students
wow,
on your
that's
wait list?
More than I thought.
Yeah, it's gotten as high as 73.
73 students on the wait list.
That's across all the grades.
That's across all grades.
High school grades.
We currently have a graduation requirement of 2 Phi-Ed credits. What does a student do if they're in ninth grade and they come to you?
So the way that we do FIED, we have a combo course, it's called Healthy Lifestyles. And because we've been on a block 80-minute periods, for 9 weeks, we split that course, and we usually go 3 days, 2 days, 3 days of physical activity. And right now we partner with Anytime Fitness, where we're doing individual workouts. We have some mindfulness and yoga, kind of that body-mind connection. And then we're in the classroom with health 2 days a week. Okay, and that's the creative way to satisfy
Both of those
both of those
requirements.
requirements.
Yeah.
And so we can just kind of shove that experience. And our teacher cycles that curriculum and content to keep it relevant and current. And so a student could take that multiple times and not have it be redundant.
And fulfill both those
Yeah.
Phi-Ed requirements. Is there more space in your area of the building that could potentially be leased for a Phi-Ed type space?
If you look at the blueprint and kind of, or the footprint of that end of the mall, there's an interesting kind of build-up taking place. We share the mall space with Southwest Metro.
Right.
Okay, they have 3 growing programs in that space, and they just built out on one of them right next to us. And so there's kind of a checkerboard effect taking place on that end of the mall.
Right.
And behind our current build, where our classrooms are to the north, there is some warehouse square footage. I can't remember how much.
Right.
That could be renovated into some sort of activity space.
So Takata is also a unique learning center in that there probably is an optimal number of students for success. Just for me, so I have this knowledge, would having more space and
More
accommodating
staff.
more students be an answer, or is 92 sort of an optimal number to educate those students?
Great question. It's a real good question. And there's definitely a sweet spot and there's a tipping point,
Right.
right? Because the students that we provide our programming for, there's some common threads. And one of them is disengagement.
Yep.
Okay, another one's struggle. And great kids, more than capable, have the ability. The system that they're currently working in just doesn't work for them. And so we try to provide a different way of doing it. Now, there's 3 core needs that they need, or 3 core needs that they need to have met. One of them is belonging, and so we do have to keep it relatively small to make those connections. Now, I have colleagues that run different ALCs, and they go as large as 150, 180, as small as 20. And so there's a wide range, and I don't think, honestly, Sean, I don't think the number is as important as to kind of what's inside that number.
Right. Well, I know you consider yourself family, and the students consider themselves a part of that family.
Right.
So I was just
So
curious.
if I were to just shoot a number, say a number,
Yeah.
I'd say anything over 135, 140 is a tipping point.
So when we were meeting about this, and you were asked to share your opinion on what, good needs to look like, and you would sort of open the door to potentially expanding programming into the middle school, grades. Can you speak a little bit about where your head's at there?
Well, technically, as you get ALC, Area Learning Center status through MDE, you are required to have a middle level programming. Okay, that's a prereq, and that also opens up the door for targeted services. And we do have a middle level program. It's just integrated. Okay, it's embedded into all of the interventions that they do at East and at West, and you can't, you can't unname it. It's there. there are a number of districts that are going to a more structured, separate model. Oftentimes in middle schools, you'll see this as ALPs. These are programs, not schools, and so they're like a school within a school model. A space for students who are really struggling to have within the already established system a place where they can build those connections, have a little bit more autonomy, build some more competency skills. But now there's also some districts that are starting to move to a separate school site and develop some middle level programming. Now, I just brought that up as foods for thought, that it would require a further study as to our current needs. What I'm seeing though is that the ages are starting to kind of work backwards in the pipeline. Okay, whereas credit recovery used to be, let's get our seniors and our juniors that are falling off, let's keep them in the system, let's give them some, the needs we're starting to identify earlier. And when we've been able to work at the TLC with ninth graders who are just starting their high school career, and we've already kind of been aware of their struggles in junior high, like we've had phenomenal success with them. Okay, I think in all 4 or 5 cases, they've graduated on time, if not early. And so early identification, I think, is a big part of this, which leads to that question, is that something, as we talk about this opportunity, that should be part of the conversation? I don't know, Scott, I don't know if it's right now, but I think it's worth asking the question.
So if I, go ahead. No, you go ahead, Dan.
Well, you mentioned there were 3 core needs, belonging being the first one. What's number 2 and 3?
So students who are disengaged and who are struggling, what we pulled from research, and Alfie Cohn's big on this, is they need belonging, that's one. They need a sense of autonomy, where they can make impactful decisions for themselves and their own learning. Okay? And then they need to feel competent. And not competent at a kind of academic level, but competent at like a hard, tangible level. And so, for example, at the TLC, like the belonging, that's just part of the core component of who we are, building connections and focusing on relationships. But the way that our programming has shifted in the last 3 years is we've gone more to a self-paced, personalized model where they have a lot of choice in their learning. Okay, for example, in English, it's almost like choose your own adventure. Okay, they can pick the content of what they're reading. They can pick the different prompts for what they're writing, and it all kind of ties back to the same standards. And so giving them a choice gives them a little bit more buy-in and relevance. And then the competence, we're not doing welding, we're not doing auto mechanic, like we don't have those hard skills, those technical skills, but the competence that we're focusing in on are those soft skills, where they can believe in themselves again, where they can have a handshake, look somebody in the eye, introduce themselves, where they can lay out a critical, thoughtful argument, where they can be proud of it. And so those are the competence skills that we're working with.
So with that, sorry, just a quick thought. With those 3 aspects in mind, is there, one of the things I've loved and I've heard great feedback about Takata is that it's in a non-traditional academic space, right? It's in a mall, not a building. As we're bringing it back to the reason we're talking about this, do you see benefits to being in a non-traditional space versus, say, we've got Pearson sitting there empty right now with some of the physical education spaces already built and whatnot? Do the benefits of this type of space outweigh?
Yeah, good question. And I don't know if it's the non-traditional space as it is separate space.
Mm-hmm.
Like whether it's in some other space, albeit an old school or a different school, or like, I think the important factor is that we can build our own identity.
Yes.
We can have our own place, we can call it. And so, again, kind of back to what Sean was alluding to about a tipping point. I don't know what the right size, if you integrated TLC into a bigger building like Pearson, and then there's other programs
Right.
into it, that kind of convolutes
Mm-hmm.
and can create some problems, I think. And so I think a separate space is the operative word. And our space is great.
I know,
Like, we
our
are
space.
very blessed
Mhm.
to have what we have for Takata. It's clean, it's new, it's small, it's like functional. I just see an opportunity to do more with it.
And one of the main reasons, other than just the, October 31st date that we had, is there's a lot of things that this particular board needs to figure out, the new board, and we had a lot of moving parts here with new superintendent, whoever that was going to be coming on, new board members being seated, and the fact that the academics at Takata really need to be taken into consideration of what's growth. It just made really good sense that we put our effort into not trying to do another 3 year, but to get that year. So I'm really appreciative to Corey Whitback and all the work that he did to afford us that opportunity. But that definitely means, as what Dave alluded to, a facilities group, whatever that looks like, needs to get going soon. And a large part of that is going to be, what does the programming need to look like from a Takata perspective? Because one thing, you said a sense of belonging. One thing that I wonder if it's fair to say that we don't want Takata to be upwardly mobile, as far as they shouldn't be, we can just be displaced and move here, move there. They're entitled to a home,
Right.
just like everybody else is,
Right.
wherever that
They
home
should.
is. So I certainly wouldn't want anybody on the board to feel like, well, this is a group that we can just move around to the building that's available at the time, but they're entitled to have roots wherever they're at.
Takata is a very, it's a very special place of learning. So,
Well, I know I cut off Angela and Dave, so.
I have a question. You may have just answered it with Matt's question about physical space. Is there any, if we continue to stay within this building, would there be any potential opportunity to work with Southwest Metro on having a physical space where you kind of like maybe schedule it? Because there's nothing for them either, other than
Right.
walking the mall.
It makes perfect sense. Like, we share that academic end of the building, and we partner a lot already. Like, our lunch programs are integrated. We kind of sometimes team on mall walks, and so we know each other fairly well, and we have a pretty good working relationship. And so, as this conversation moves forward, it would make sense to bring them into the fold.
Great. As I think about my kid that's there,
Yeah.
walking this mall seems a little boring every single day. So something different would be nice.
Yeah.
And I think even the mall might consider that if they want to ever beef this back up for retail or whatever, that they've even talked about making one end kind of their education end and then going back to this. And I don't know if they want us cruising the halls. So
Right.
having some space might be to their advantage as well.
have we talked to them all about?
Yes, we've talked to them, and that's part of, I think, why, it wasn't like a straight line, hey, can we have an extra year to decide what we're gonna do? I mean, because there's some risk to them
Right.
as well. So they really wanna work with us,
Mhm.
and so, yes, and I think they've been thinking about, they're trying to keep this a viable space as well.
Right.
It has been great for us. So I think we're way over on our
Yes.
10 minutes here. And so I'm gonna, can I sum up on this? So, and Scott alluded to this. It seemed like it fit because they talked about grad requirements and what the impact on Takata is, and the size of his wait list. He's changed graduation requirements, the possible expansion of programming, whether that's just a physical space or whether it's in response to what's happening at the high school. It's even that 9-12 versus 10-12. And so there's a lot of factors that play into this, which fits into work on this facilities task force, which is the lease of both of these spaces, which we've bought time on that. There's always the question of what we're doing with Central Family because of its age. And there's Pearson. And so there's a lot of moving parts here. It seems like some of them we have to do regardless of a facility study, but that facility study, which some people often equate with you want to build another school, I don't think that's the situation we're in right now. It's to figure out how to do with what we have. And this is that what's happening at Takata is an important piece of that. So I think at an upcoming work session, we'd wanna, Eric has even started to build out kind of a timeline if we started looking at what programming and space needs might look like, how quickly things would need to happen. I think there's also understanding what the costs are, our cost per square foot versus kind of what's available out there and showing how competitive that is and maybe what we actually have here. And so I'd say at a future work session, it probably makes more sense when the next board is in place that the board says, maybe we want to start this facility task force, and that happens then we talk more about this in a work session.
Agreed.
Okay?
Thanks
Thank
very
you,
much.
Eric. Thanks, Eric. All right, move on to old business action items, number 7.1. Superintendent Redmond is going to go ahead and take on the resolution canvassing returns.
Yeah, there'll be two things pertaining to the election. The first is canvassing the returns, and you'll see there's some attachments in there. The first is, going over the resolution is canvassing the returns of votes of school district general election. You'll see there were 24,524 votes cast. You'll see a breakdown of the recipients of those votes. I would also, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, I applaud the efforts of anybody who runs for public office, especially at a level like a school board where it's primarily about service. And so thank you to everybody who was a candidate. And this work is put together by the county under the direction of the Secretary of State's office. So you'll see an abstract, which is a further breakdown of total voters, votes cast, things like that. But the resolution is recognition of the 10 candidates and the vote totals for each of them. And so I would certainly recommend approving that.
And Sarah, did you suggest that we need to go ahead and read the resolution?
Mike certainly hit a good portion of it. The last part of the resolution might be great.
All right, let's go ahead and read the bottom half of that. Resolution canvassing returns of votes of school district general election. Let it be resolved by the School Board of Independent School District number 720, State of Minnesota as follows. It is hereby found, determined, and declared that the general election of the voters of this school district held on November 6, 2018, in conjunction with the state general election, was in all aspects duly and legally called and held. As specified in the attached abstract and return of votes cast, a total of 24,524 voters of the district voted and said general election on the general election of 4 school board members for 4-year term vacancies on the board caused by the expiration of term on the first Monday in January following the general election as follows. Do I need to read those? I think we're good there.
The next point says we got it, so.
Yep, we'll go on to number 3, vote 3. Mr. Peterson, Julie Tomzik, Paul Christensen, and Joel Aldrich, 4-year terms beginning on the first Monday in January 2019. The clerk is hereby directed to certify the results of the election, and the county auditor of each county in which the school district is located in whole or in part. Entertain a motion to accept this resolution?
So moved.
Second by Tony. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. And we'll move on to 7.2, resolution authorizing the issuance of certificates.
Yeah, and this one is, congratulations to the 4 persons who were selected to serve as new school board members. Christy Peterson, Judy Tomzik, Paul Christensen, and Joe Aldrich. And you want to read, or do you want me to read?
You read this one.
All right, happy to read. Resolution authorizing issuance of certificates of election and directing the school district clerk to perform other election-related duties. Whereas the board has canvassed the general election for school board members held in conjunction with the state general election on November 6, 2018. Now therefore be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District number 720, Shakopee, State of Minnesota, as follows. 1, the chair and clerk are hereby authorized to execute certificates of election On behalf of the School Board of Independent School District Number 720 to the following candidates: Christy Peterson, Judy Tomsick, Paul Christensen, and Joe Aldrich, who have received a sufficiently large number of votes to be elected to fill vacancies on the board caused by expiration of terms on the first Monday in January next following the election based on the results of the canvass. Number 2, the certificate of election shall be in substantially the form attached hereto. Number 3, after the time for contesting the election is passed and the candidate has filed all campaign financial reports required by Minnesota statutes, Chapter 211A, the clerk of the school board is hereby directed to deliver a certificate to each person entitled hereto, personally or by certified mail. And number 4, the clerk is hereby directed to enclose with the certificate a form of acceptance of office and oath of office in substantially the form attached hereto.
There you go. Entertain a motion to approve the resolution as
I'll make that motion.
Sean.
Second.
Rich, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and that motion carries as well.
Congratulations.
Yes,
Good
I do believe we have in the gallery our newly elected board members. You can give a wave. There you are, that's the one sitting up here.
And which one has to sing, Neil?
They get to draw straws.
Joe volunteered.
He raised his hand.
Draw straws. All right, move on to item 7.3, special education programming and staffing update. I'd like to call Director of Special Services, Julie Fred. Good evening.
I will just go ahead and get started. I do have some numbers that you guys want to see in a second, but I will just talk. I was able to talk with the personnel committee, and I know that Jeff was able to bring it to the finance committee last night. So just a really quick update about why I'm here and talking about staffing and programming for special ed is that we currently have one center-based EBD program at an elementary level, and that's at Eagle Creek Elementary. As I've talked with you guys about before, and I think Judy might have been the only one that wasn't present, but I know that with your background, you probably understand too that our center-based programs, there's not a cap or a statute that tells us how many we have to have in there. There's a guideline. And we like to keep our center-based programs around 7 to 8 students. Eagle Creek, within the next couple of weeks, will have 14 students in their center-based EBD program. Some move-ins from this year, some students from our district that have had an increase in needs, so we need to put in a more restrictive program. And then some students from Eagle Creek that just happen to be in the boundaries that are also in that program. So what we would like to do is open the second center-based program at Eagle Creek. We have gone ahead and talked with Josie Cuevisto and looked at space and how we could divide up kids. But doing so requires another center-based EBD teacher and program supports specialists or paras to support that program as well. Because our center-based kids, especially with EBD, with our high behaviors, really require a lot of that adult support. And the second piece of this, and another teacher, is our programs at East and West Junior High. Our resource programs, which are the programs that do more of the pull-out, not only replacement curriculum for math and reading and language arts now at 6th grade, but also our CNI, which is our communication interaction class, and that's more of our social emotional, our behavior social skills class, and or that more emotional piece of it. And our focus skills class, which is the course that our special ed teachers teach, that focuses more on developing those skills on their IEP, some of the organizational skills, some of the skills that they might not need a pull-out class to teach, but that they can get that service in that place. So we also have an influx of students in middle school. Currently at West Junior High, there are 10 students in initial evaluation, which is a little bit unusual, meaning they'll receive service for the first time, and it looks like most of them will qualify for service. We've also had some other move-ins. We've had some move-outs too, but we've had some other move-in kids. So our problem here is that we need to add additional courses in order for the students to be able to meet the minutes of service on the IEPs that they have, and we don't have the bodies to teach those courses. So we're currently either really packing in the classes we have, and the teachers still aren't able to get to every student and deliver that individualized instruction and meet their IEP minutes. It's also in a special education class, having 14 to 18 kids is a lot when you're supposed to be working on individual goals.
Yeah.
So that's where we're currently at, and we don't have the bodies to fill other classes, but we have the kids. So, what I'm here for today is to see additional staff of those 5 positions, the 2 full-time teachers and the 3 paraprofessionals. And I do have, if you guys want to see, just a breakdown of how some, in the next few years, how some of those costs and the cost analysis could go in paying for those staff members. If you'd like that, I can pass that.
We did get the benefit of that at the finance committee, and I don't know about you guys, but I think it's important that everybody get a chance to see how that actually plays
Okay.
out, so.
We saw it too at the personnel committee.
Yeah.
Judy and
So there
Tony
may just
probably.
be, so
There's
there's
2 of
Judy and
us.
Tony.
Tony.
It may just be Judy and Tony.
And I should let you guys know as well, the 2 of you who haven't talked, we worked with Jeff Priest and we worked with Keith and looked at some different ways to make that happen. And talked a lot about having in the future.
I don't know if I'm allowed to make this request, but just in the interest of education, could you pass one?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I would like them to
Yeah.
have the information that we have.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think while we're digesting that, I mean, outside of these funding offsets and other budget impacts, I mean, this is a compliance thing, right? If we don't offer services that are mandated by IEPs, right, that's problematic, not to mention
Federal law.
Yeah.
the one
Yes,
teacher
it is.
who's 14 EBD students in one setting, and right now that's a heroic effort, I think,
To be in compliance with federal law.
And the fact that she
So-
still shows up every day.
Right.
we very much appreciate that, and we want to work to get her some relief very quickly.
But we also have to ensure that we're always meeting our federal standards of minutes. And if we're not doing that with our current staffing, we have to address it.
Do we already know who's going to be hired, that it says what step they'd be in the salary?
No, what we typically do is we want to make sure, we recognize at this time of the year, most of the teachers that we've been able to hire, especially in special education, are coming at that tier 1 or that BA level. So what we usually do is take an average, and then assuming that most teachers go on and they get their masters, we wanted to make sure that we weren't undercutting the cost, so we make sure that we always add that master's in the step. So if anything, we're pleasantly surprised if it doesn't cost as much.
I always thought a special ed teacher had a master's degree.
No, not necessarily, just like a general ed teacher, you can go back and get that later.
Yeah, so that model is based on estimates. of
Yeah,
who
this is
we
all
think-
estimates.
This is
So
all
no,
just
We do
estimates.
not know the people who will take the position.
Sure.
And in those estimates, obviously, there's some funding from the state because of the added students.
Yeah, we have not, well, we haven't reached our cap yet in our special education funding, and so that's good. So we typically see, and I know this says 60%, and talking with Jeff, feels like it's more like 50% now,
Mhm.
that we would get back from MDE in those salaries, so we do recoup some of the costs there.
So there are some offsets, this isn't straight a budget variance, but there is a component.
Yeah, but as we talked about in the finance committee, it is an incremental cost, which is what I'm always asking about. Though it's an incremental cost we need to do not only for the benefit of the students, but to be in compliance. So we recognize this as an increased cost, but it's one of those things that we've always demonstrated that as a board we will do in the interest of our students as well as to be in compliance.
The questions for Julie?
Julie, I want to tell you, you were pretty clear at our personnel committee meeting, and I'm sure you shared too, that you don't bring this type of thing to us lightly. You have done a lot of due diligence in the background to ensure that this is the road that we have to go. And so I just want you to know that I really appreciate the work that you did to just ensure that this is the right direction.
Well, thank you, I appreciate that. We always want to make sure, especially when we are looking at increased costs, that we are doing everything we can behind the scenes, and we want to put the student needs first, yet we also want to be responsible with the funds that we have.
Yeah, this one feels good too, they know that it wasn't kind of the personnel committee, they got a chance to really, stress test it, the finance committee got a chance to stress test it, so I would say this has been.
Vetted.
I agree,
Well,
procedurally, I like the way that feels. too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Fully support.
Tony, do you have questions?
Nope. I think it makes sense. So I can make the motion to open up and hopefully soon hire these 5 positions.
I'll second the motion.
Motion by Matt, second by Angela. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign, and that motion carries.
Well, I thank you guys, and our staff members, they will be thrilled, and we will get that posted. Hopefully, fill them down.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Julie.
Okay, new business discussion items, 8.1 draft of the 2019 school board meetings and other important dates. Ready?
Yeah, there's a draft being projected and, of the calendar, and certainly as time goes on, we can make some changes. Probably the biggest change from how we've operated this year, or even in recent years, is in a typical month, we would start, the first meeting would be a work session, the second meeting would be a business session. And if you look at, I think probably the first, one of the early decisions, we'll do the organizational meeting for the board on January 14th. If you look at what's highlighted, which says a draft, Saturday, February 16th, which is a Saturday of President's Day weekend. There's a winter retreat scheduled. There's also, if you look back, if you kind of go towards the top, there's the MSBA Winter Leadership Conference, and hopeful you can get as many board members as possible to attend that. And then there's a work session on January 28th and a work session on February 11th. It might be possible that that's kind of plenty of work and retreat type stuff, and so that's certainly something we want to discuss, I think, on January 14th. And then there's penciled in July as well, a summer retreat for the board. Any kind of quick questions?
Yeah, maybe just for the benefit of new board members and the public, can you differentiate a retreat versus work session versus business meeting?
Sure, I think a work session, you're working on, just to take, might be an opportunity to vet something, maybe not quite what Julie just shared, but something like that. Some of the items that would be coming up on the next business session for the board, a little bit more direct connection to that. Summer retreat, wider, kind of a wider array of items, kind of more thoughtful planning, thinking further out, thinking months, maybe even years out, just trying to get some input what's going on, and so looking at instead of a broader collection or a wider array of items. So we'll jumble those all together. Yeah.
And as one of our newly re-elected board members pointed out, retreat might be the wrong title because people might
I'm thinking
assume that it's
spa.
travel or
I
a
know,
spa
it's
retreat
not.
or
It's
something.
here. It's here.
There's a lot of
Here.
singing and
We have yet to get our nails done if they're done.
I do have a couple of conflicts with this.
And what might those be?
We'll talk about them offline.
Next.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we did change the terminology.
Yes. good
For
point.
what is being referred to as a work session as previously, what was it called?
Learning
session.
Learning session. And not that we're not learning as we're doing this, but I think even the term learning, it's really, you're doing work. You're learning while you work, but it's really preparation for those other meetings. And so I think a work session is a little more accurate representation. I'm certainly open to, presenting changes for, what you call the retreat. It's certainly work as well, but I think the idea is it's a larger period of time and a little more kind of open discussion and broader discussion. I don't know, I don't have it yet.
Yeah, and just, go ahead.
Well, I want to chime in on one thing, because I think offline I was part of this discussion, I know I had some of this with Dave. You'll note, folks, on this, the facilities committee has kind of been resurrected. I think that's a function of the fact that we're believing there's no determination the board has to act on this, but the BOC will in essence go away. And with all the discussion on a facilities task force, and we historically had a facilities committee, the thought was, in talking with Sarah, was let's just get a placeholder on the calendar. The board has to act, the newly formed board has to act to, say that's what we want to do, who's going to be on it, et cetera. So that's a placeholder at this point, but the thought is that's probably a direction we might
I'm not gonna be here, but I really appreciate the scheduled, in advance, policy, personnel, finance, facilities. For you guys, that'll be really helpful for you to be able to not only schedule your lives around, but also schedule, the agendas for those and being able to be thoughtful in topics.
And I believe that you,
We should definitely add more to it, though.
Would you stop?
I was just
How many hours do we have left?
the new board reserves the right to, what's it called, stop loss? We can bring former board members back, bring them back into active duty for committee work.
Clock
as-
committee.
Pretty sure that's never
as we
gonna happen.
see fit. There's no escaping your board service, it's like the Hotel California.
Yeah. And I would just add, to kind of echo some of that, none of it's set in stone, but I think it's much easier to work from a draft
Yes.
Yes.
and provide critical feedback and alter and adjust than it is, hey, here's an open calendar. So that's the intent of this.
You'll notice that there's a slated standing finance committee meeting prior to the business meeting every month.
Yep.
And then the committee meeting that's prior to the work session rotates between policy, alternates between policy and personnel.
I think it's great.
So, and the facilities is in its position where Bach is currently at, but like Mike said, this is all just to try to get some pen paper.
And then just one last point for those who, are watching at home. The work session, or the business meeting is the only place where we can actually
Right.
take
Do
votes
business.
and
Take action.
enact agreements and whatnot.
And they're all open.
They're all open, committee meetings, everything, are open
Yep.
public.
And Sarah and Mike, maybe for new members as well. It's in the first meeting where committee assignments get made, or how do people
Yeah.
know what they're?
We elect a chair and then the
Yeah.
chair
Oh, then the-
solicits
There's usually a delay.
interest.
Historically.
Usually
The chair gets put in place, and then, again, this is just historical practice, and Scott can certainly chime in. The chair collects, solicits interest, and then uses that gap then to come back and say, here's these committee assignments. So it wouldn't be the first meeting, it might be the second meeting.
Gotcha.
And with that MSBA winter leadership, Sarah, have you reached out or Mike bringing them to the four winners so they know that they
Yeah.
need to go?
Yeah, a few weeks back, I wanna say maybe 2, 3, maybe, we did a save the date.
Okay.
For the phase trainings. Phase 1 is Tuesday evening, phase 1 is Tuesday evening, phase 2 is Wednesday, and then the leadership conference on Thursday and Friday. And I did, extend a save the date for folks. There are some additional phase training dates that have been added recently. So, certainly if these dates don't work for folks, there are some other opportunities.
They might just not be the Twin Cities.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
If
yes.
you wanna go to Thief River Falls.
Or-
St.
Yeah.
St. Peter's an easy
St.
one.
Peter.
St. Peter's the easiest one,
Right,
yeah,
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 yeah.
right down the road.
Okay, so there's no action, this is just
Right.
informational. I know what things are looking like for next week.
Do you guys have a copy of this?
And do they know, that on average you'll be assigned to 2 to 3 committees, right? 2, maybe we don't have as many committees as we used to have.
So there'll be 5 with facilities, so.
Yeah, there's,
Well, but I mean like city council liaison.
Oh, the liaisons?
there's roughly 3 per person.
3 per person.
Traditionally, everybody will be on at least 2 of the core, so facilities, finance personnel.
Yep.
There's a couple core, then there's the advisory. Policy. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Super important, those policies.
Well, Sarah, do you have what we all have now?
Yeah.
So you could send that to all of
Yeah,
them.
you're
just so they
reading my
can
mind.
get it.
On the district website, under
Oh.
school board, and then board committees and liaisons, assignments.
There they are.
And I have a template for all this, that's kind of an easy plug and play for whoever the new chair is. You can quickly reassign as you like.
And you can see that some of these are just automatic by if you're an officer, the chair and the vice chair make up the executive committee, that kind of thing. So some are whatever's voted on that night, reorg meeting.
Cool.
And just so you're not totally nervous, the liaison assignments, some of them meet monthly and some of them, I've never been to a Minnesota State High School League meeting, so.
I had that for 5 years and didn't do it.
so I'm not
I
really
think we
sure.
got one vote, so.
Well, and
They
we,
need someone on record
Oh,
in case there's a situation.
then I did a great job.
Yes, you do.
wow. And there are some things that, you know.
So that
in
means some of us work harder than
In-
others.
You guys might wanna fight for that one.
In January, you may decide that some of these are just no longer necessary, so.
But we pared it down.
Yeah,
from-
We already pared it
I
down.
can already see things that need to come off right now, so.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? Otherwise? Okay, number 9, new business action items, of which we have none. 10, other, we have no others, so we'll roll around. Number 11, committee reports. Who wants to start? Sean, you got any committee report?
Well, no, I mean, personnel.
Or liaison, anything?
No, I didn't go to the Minnesota State High School League meeting.
Thanks for your dedication. Reg?
No, but a heads up that we will have our next tranche of policies that we'll be asking you all to review. The policy committee will take a stab at those first. You'll have an opportunity to kind of relax a little bit, but those will be coming out in preparation for first reading at the next meeting.
I'm not in charge of any committee.
Anything?
Well, something I was gonna say. Remember that we had a young man come and read his heartfelt, well-written letter to us about looking at hiring students who had graduated from the, what program? I'm forgetting the name. The transition program here in Shakopee, finding some employment. He had been working as a volunteer, and I think he was asking for the dignity of real work. And obviously, we can't create jobs for people just for the sake of it. But I talked with Julie, and she's looking at it in such a great way. And this, I hadn't even considered it, but in a much broader scope, thinking about working in the transition program. You hope that employers are going to hire these students. That's the whole purpose of transition. And we're an employer. So we should be looking at how those students' needs and our needs match and looking at jobs for them. Now, Nick Brown, I think that Eagle Creek is looking at something for him, maybe? Is that still a question mark?
Currently volunteering there, and Josie might have some temporary needs that we, as a kind of hiring as a temp that she's looking at. But yeah, he's been doing a lot of volunteering there, and she's finding he's really able to fill a need that currently they're using other paraprofessionals or students or.
And using some compensatory funds.
Yeah,
so-
for that, for this year, and then we would look at down the road how we create some of these positions, and I know Keith and I have been working with that a little bit.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's cool.
We'll go around the horn. Ashley, you got anything? Sarah? Julie?
You got all mine, but.
All right, well done. Everybody in the back took off. Keith? Nothing? Kathy?
Just once again, congratulations to the 4 of you, and thank you for the others who ran. It's always disappointing if you run for something and don't win, but it is a courageous step to file, and a surreal experience to see your own name on a ballot. And I just applaud the effort and the passion, and I hope people weren't for it, and I hope the people who didn't get elected stay involved and find other ways to serve the community.
The finance committee met tonight. We went over the audit, and we will be going over the audit at our next board meeting. That's all I got for you.
Okay. Dave?
I know they're gonna be here next time, but a number of people were at the volleyball tournament. It was very unbelievably well attended by Shakopee fans. The last few weeks, there's been industry council meetings for each of the academies, which there's outside community members and businesses and other agencies that are represented there. Lots of great volunteerism. And tomorrow is the board steering committee meeting, which is also another large group of community members that gets together and, I'll probably hack this up, so Tim, you can correct me if I miss it, but that really has helped do a reality check on what's happening in our academies from an outside perspective, and that group meets tomorrow.
I just want to say congratulations to the girls volleyball. I don't know if you said that too. It's awesome, constellation champs. And look for your catalogs, should be coming out this week for the community ed.
Oh, let's see, one more weekend of performances for the Adams family. If you want something to do this
That was
weekend,
fun.
come to the
That was
Shakopee
great.
High School and
I loved it.
see a new musical comedy based on a classic TV show. Good fun.
You get to snap along.
Yes,
My,
you
my
snap
senior
along.
went to it of his own accord.
Really?
On Saturday night. He was walking out the door and I said, "Where are you going tonight?" "Going to see the Addams Family." And he came back and he said it was funny and fun and entertaining. He loved it. So that's coming from a student. So I'm excited to see it this weekend. It's really good. Yeah.
Just happy to be here.
Well said.
That's the way to end.
All right, number 12, recognition of visitors to the board meeting. Any visitors? A couple of you, hi visitors, we recognize you again. Number 13, upcoming meetings and important dates. Everything's up there on the big screen. For those that don't have anything to do tomorrow night, Bach, live and in person here.
Can I actually chime in on this?
Go ahead.
I may be mistaken, but help me with this, you two guys. I think we moved to just 1 a month, so I'm questioning whether the 28th block is still happening.
We did, and it's not the 28th, it's just the 14th.
That's what I
Oh,
thought.
and
Cool.
I apologize.
No, that's fine. I just want to clarify for public purposes that that meeting actually is not
Yeah.
happening.
I apologize.
There you go. Anything else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
Who wants it?
Judy.
Judy?
I give it to
Hey,
her.
whoa.
She's been here.
Wow, I'm gonna end this right now. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign, that motion carries.
Old now?